met through the Coast Guard, but as I mentioned, he is a graduate of our program, so he's going to be able to talk about his work as an industrial hygienist and public health, and also opportunities after our program and how you can use it to your advantage. So Captain Dayton is a U.S. Public Health Service officer currently assigned to the U.S. Coast Guard Training Center in Yorktown, Virginia. Prior to joining the Coast Guard, he was an environmental health officer in Tennessee, working in the capacity as a public health officer. He completed his first master's degree in occupational health from Hunter College of the City University of New York in 2002, and his master's of Homeland Security degree from the Penn State University, which is what it was called back before it was the Master of Professional Studies. Captain Dayton served with the Coast Guard in New York and Alaska before transferring services to the Public Health Service. And as a PHS officer, he served as the Environmental Response Division Chief in North Carolina, at Coast Guard headquarters as the Chief of Occupational Health and Industrial Hygiene, went back to Alaska as a Safety and Environmental Health Officer, and he is currently in Yorktown, Virginia as the Lead Industrial Hygiene Instructor. And he's also the acting COVID-19 contact tracing lead, as well as Yorktown's testing operation manager for the Coast Guard's COVID-19 response. He's currently pursuing his doctorate of education at Liberty University to be conferred in 2022. He holds certifications as a certified hazardous materials manager, a registered environmental health manager, and an OSHA authorized general industry trainer. So Captain Dayton, welcome, and thank you so much for talking with us tonight.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. So welcome, everyone. Thank you for having me here. I have Penn State near and dear to my heart, and I am so thrilled to be able to come back and just have a conversation. And that's kind of what I want to set this up as. I don't want to be a talking head here. I really want to have a genuine conversation with you, and just anything that you may want to go over and kind of cover in terms of career trajectory and that sort of things. I think will be helpful. I kind of tried to put myself back in the day back in 2011 and trying to figure out what I was thinking back then in terms of how this degree was going to help me continue and again go forward with certain aspects. So as Jen mentioned, I had been already trained as an industrial hygienist. The Coast Guard put me through that school, and I was able to do a payback tour, is what we call it. So they send us to school for a couple of years, and then we come back and do that tour as a Coast Guard kind of payback. That was a good thing for me, and I was able to also do an inter-service transfer at that time. So I was a Coast Guard officer back then, and then I transferred into the Public Health Service and was still able to keep working as a public health officer for the Coast Guard. So, so what were some of the things that were kind of key to me being able to kind of bring the Homeland Security degree into the realm which I worked were some kind of similar aspects to what I did already as a health and safety officer, and what that brought to me with a Homeland Security degree. I think a lot of those, the nexus would be emergency response. That would be a big one for the Coast Guard. So as a Homeland Security degree holder, as well as an industrial hygienist, those things blended very well in order to be able to respond effectively. How you manage certain elements of a emergency response and that sort of thing. And I'll go back into some of the events and some of the things that will kind of illustrate that a little bit more as we go on. So first, I want to go through and kind of talk about some of the classes that I took. I don't know that those are still in the curriculum. I think they may be. I meant to research that before I came back in. But there was a natural disasters course that I took. It was the Geoscience 4024. And so it was just a really neat class to be able to get through for me. Had a lot of aspects of different natural disasters that occurred. The Coast Guard does a lot of responses for natural disasters, things that would happen on the water, of course, things like hurricanes and oil spills and that sort of thing. Maybe not so natural for an oil spill, but it could be as a result of a hurricane or something of that nature. So again, being able to understand some of the elements of what we need to look at. I was telling Jen earlier, we got to the point where we could start to calculate the tidal surges and things that were coming in as the hurricane was building up. And I was downloading data or getting data from NOAA during Katrina and that sort of thing. And we already had people doing this sort of work. They weren't relying on me, but it was just neat to be able to see what was going on and what we could expect in terms of tidal surges. And I got to be able to predict those pretty well in terms of the mathematical formulas that kind of went forward. And we could see where areas were going to be inundated and that sort of thing. So how did that apply to me later as a industrial hygienist, health and safety officer in Alaska? You may remember the earthquake and tsunami of the Indian Ocean, Banda Aceh, and those areas were tremendously affected. We sent a lot of PHS officers out there at that time because of that earthquake and subsequent tidal flow and tsunamis. Kodiak had to rethink their entire kind of paradigm in terms of where we were and what was going to happen if we did get a major tsunami earthquake event. The base, the Kodiak Air Station and Coast Guard base there are very low in terms of where they are at on the waterfront. We had used some models that were very old back that were just extremely dated in terms of what they were able to provide us. As we got new data and started kind of calculating some of the inundation and what would happen if we were to get a 7.5 to 8.2 earthquake, we realized that we were not responding or not going to respond in such a way that would protect not only our Coast Guard members, but others that were there. We had families that lived there that were living with Coast Guard members there as well. So I was working directly with the state of Alaska, as well as engineers from the Coast Guard and others, to be able to kind of make these calculations. Well, what was the first thing we did? We went through and started making our evacuation zones a much broader zone. So instead of a half a mile inland, we were actually going now nearly a mile inland to be able to again escape any of the inundation. And so the Coast Guard relies on the Alaska tsunami warning system, and so it's pretty robust in terms of what it does for us, and will give us ample alarm if there were going to be a tsunami. That could be anywhere from 10 to 30 minutes before we would expect, and it just depends on where the epicenter was and that sort of thing. But we could have had a lot more time, and we would have still been in an inundated area. So we again had to back that up, and I really do attribute that to the understanding of that and being able to talk the vernacular and what we needed to do in order to dampen the influx of the water and to be able to understand how far it was going to come in. And so that was again a real benefit of having this degree and going through this program. So and it was again a very cross kind of element there with the industrial hygiene. I'm responsible for health and safety for all of our members, civilian and military alike on the base, and also that nexus with the Penn State element in that natural disasters course. So a lot of good things were in that course as well, with talking about earthquakes. The professor I had at the time was actually he is world renowned in terms of his ability to kind of assess damage and look at vulnerabilities for earthquakes. We were in class I was taking his class, and he was actually in Christchurch, New Zealand, when a major 7.0 plus earthquake hit, and there was major damage down there. So it was an asynchronous class, and so we were going back and forth with emails, and he was telling us, yeah, I'm right in it, and the government here realizes who I am, and was down here for a speech, and he was able to kind of do some again discussion and make some mitigations in terms of the earthquake that was down there. So I was just amazed. And so here's a world-renowned expert, was caught right in the middle of an earthquake, one of the more major earthquakes of that decade, and there he was able to come back and assist the local government there. So what a neat thing! What an awesome thing to be able to do. And again, just to know that we were being led by that person in terms of the coursework and garnering the expertise that he had in that particular course. So good things going on there. So I remember again reading about the Johnstown flood, and my mom and my dad had talked about that because their grandparents had talked about it, and so they remember hearing about it, and it was something that kind of the lore had gone through and had been part of what they had talked about in the early century, last century, and so they were. It was always something that was remembered, and people remembered the dam breaking, and there was just a lot of trepidation about that and what was going on, and so just think about how that lore and that information was spread. If it was something like that were to happen today, it would be just constant nonstop until the time that you're numb. When it happened back then, it still was a big mystery, and things you have to kind of fight to get the pieces of information that you needed in order to kind of understand what had happened and what was going on. But they do remember it, and they remember people talking about that for decades later, and just how serious that was, and what occurred during that time. So again, a lot of good things that were going on. So I'll move on to another class now. So this is the disaster communication. Disaster communication is something it's near and dear to me. Risk communication is kind of part of this, and having that risk communication is really elemental to my job. Ever since I've been in the Coast Guard, risk communication has been something that I know how to do it. I don't know that I can say that I do it perfectly, but I've learned a lot. And again, this class, HLS 553, was the course that kind of set me up really to understand what that disaster communication was about, as well as risk communication in terms of getting certain things across to the public, across to responders, what's going on. We have to do risk communication all the time within the Coast Guard. We have to take risk into account with a lot of the missions that we run. And so just understanding how to communicate that risk and how to get that across. And so one of the elements that, again, I'll go back to Kodiak, the base I was on in Kodiak had its own water system. That water system was run by the Coast Guard. It was we had our own facilities engineers that ran that system. That system had been around since about the 1930s when the Navy owned it. So you can imagine it's old. Parts of it had been plumbed and reconfigured, and a lot of things that had happened to that system, but not everything had been. And so we were responsible for to report and be able to take certain samples during the year. And all of a sudden we started getting high lead content. When I say high, I'm talking in the parts per billion range, but it was higher than what the state had allowed us in terms of regulating it. And so we had to report that out. We had to report the lead being high. And so when you start start to do that, you really have to be careful in how you message that, how you get that out to the public. What is that going to say? This was 1 year after the Flint, Michigan lead story had kind of broke. And so that was, if you want to talk about disaster and communication, that was probably the poster child for that, what not to do in certain instances. And so we were very sensitive to what was going on in terms of lead. So I had a good CO at the point. At that time, a commanding officer that was very forward-leaning and understood that we needed to get this message out and we needed to shape that correctly. We didn't want to tell a story that wasn't true, but we wanted to shape it correctly so people were informed. And so we had to make sure that the information was out there. So we had lots of town hall meetings. We had lots of development in terms of being able to bring people in. We've started putting up web pages that had lots of information on them. We started talking about the risk, what the risk was in terms of how people were affected by this or could be affected by it. And so the risk was very low. But again, you start telling people that there's lead in your water and that it's above a regulated limit. They don't want to hear that. Especially I was approached by women who were had either just had children or were expecting. And so we have to go through that iteration in terms of what the risk levels are. And so I was very cautious with them and said, hey, let's get you on bottled water. Let's go ahead and do this. And in my heart and in my brain, I knew that that risk was extremely low and that there would be no risk to the fetus or small children. But I did not want to put that out there that the Coast Guard was allowing people to drink leaded water. And so that's something you just don't want to do. And so we made the adjustments as necessary, and we talked it over, and just we all understood that yeah, that instance we just want to make sure that everything, and it's the term abundance of caution was probably thrown around more than I ever had thought it would be, but we were just extremely cautious in that situation. So that went on for about 1.5 years. So we were talking, having town hall meetings, bringing people in. The press was there. We got a lot of press time with even the Anchorage News, and so they had come down and reporting on a little small town of Kodiak, which is only about 5,000 people, but still they want to cover that for their constituency and make sure that folks are understanding that they're on it in terms of the risk and that sort of thing. So got to go in front of the cameras a few times, got to kind of talk that up and be able to make people, I think, feel like we had the situation under control. That's a big part of that. If you don't have that appearance and you don't have that kind of professionalism that you need, it's going to really come back on you. And so you need to portray that. And the only way that I know how to portray that is to get smart about things or be smart about things and try to project that in terms of your abilities, and that you're going to take care of folks, and that's your paramount mission there, is to make sure that people are going to be okay. That's something that's driven in me. That's a passion for me to take care of folks and be able to be that health and safety person. So it was fairly easy. I'm not sure I get that across all the time, but so I kind of had to fall back on some of those risk communications elements in order to make sure that I was doing what I needed to do to get the message across. And that's what it really boils down to, is that messaging. So we had lots of—
Before you go on, I want to interrupt real quick. Sorry. In the situation that you were just talking about, I mean, that wasn't like a disaster situation. So you were able to do things like your town halls and all of those. But we have a question in the chat. What kind of preparation does the Coast Guard have for events where during a disaster where communications resources get interrupted? The first thing that came to my mind is, I know during major hurricanes, at least information coming into the Coast Guard, we've got people that are monitoring like Twitter, because in some cases people's phone weren't able to use their phones, but they were able to get on Twitter and were able to, oh my God, this is my address. I'm I'm in the attic. I need help. So, I mean, that was the first thing that came to my mind, but if you want to speak to that one a little bit more.
Yeah, sure. And that's exactly where I was headed with that. And so the development, so we have the ability in the Coast Guard to kind of surge. We have that surge capacity, and we can call on, we call them the IMATs. They're the incident management assist teams, as well as our strike teams, which are folks that can come in and do certain things. And so they can come in as a whole entity and just take over the whole response for us, or you can ask them to do specific things for you, like your finance portion or run your operations portion. Another part of that is running your PAO, your public affairs office. That public affairs office will have someone come in. And so we did do that. We actually relied on our sector folks to bring a PAO officer down, and they were able to set up a web page for us. They were able to get out mass communications. They were, again, LinkedIn and the different social media. They were not only putting information out, but they were also monitoring information as it came in. And so they were able to kind of see what was going on and see what some of the weak spots were. We saw where we had communicated poorly, or we didn't get enough information out there, or there was conflicting information at times. And so that's really good to analyze that and be able to kind of come back and correct that, or say, yeah, this was put out a few weeks ago. This was before we knew certain things, and as we adjusted and grew, we had to change our tack, so to speak. And so things like that happen, but you've got to account for it. Otherwise, you look like you're not being exactly truthful. And so you've got to be very careful with those elements and understand them. And the only way to do that is to monitor that. And this day and age of social media, even back then, when I say back then, this was in the 2015 kind of range. And there was a lot of social media. And I remember seeing things that were just outright untruths. And we had to kind of battle that from time to time. We also had to make a decision whether or not it was worth the fight. This is, something so outlandish. If anybody just looks at this just a little bit, they're going to understand that there's just no validity in this. And so we kind of had to make those calls every now and then. And so, they would say things like, oh, the lead in the water is going out into the streams whenever we discharge, and it's going to kill all the salmon. So you're like, wow, that's a pretty far stretch. And so, if somebody had come to us, and asked that question, we could have dispelled it, but it was something that was online, and we just kind of, it died on its own. It didn't, we didn't need to really follow up with that very much. So yeah, great question. And so those are elements that we kind of go through. The RPAO, the Public Affairs Office, also will give talking points. And so small communities, especially, and really anywhere, you can be caught off guard. People will come up and all of a sudden you've got a mic in your face, and because you've got a uniform on and you are the person representing the entire Coast Guard at that moment. And so you've got to be very careful. And so the PAO would kind of preload us with talking points. And so those talking points were very, very kind of succinct. They would say things like, there will be a incident command meeting at 1300, and I'm sure they're going to cover some of the aspects that you're asking about. We didn't want people talking more than they needed to. We didn't want them going into certain realms that they were not comfortable in going into. So we knew that we had to have certain talking points to be able to kind of put it in the right realm so people could get the right information later on. So that was something that we would kind of offer up to a lot of folks. So knowing the public speaking do's and don'ts, that's just kind of key. And so just being able to see yourself talk in front of large groups of people is very helpful. And so if you've not done that before, and if you are in this position, there's a real good chance that you may be hired in a position where you've got to address the public and talk about some of the concepts and maybe fears and try to belay those or at least express what's going on. So because of that, you really need to get good at kind of that public speaking quotient and be able to articulate what you're trying to get across to folks. Otherwise, again, it can get real sloppy real quick. And so I would challenge you to kind of brush up on those skills as well, because they are very helpful in all your career aspects, but especially addressing the public and in the disaster communication kind of realm. So big parts of that. So looking at my notes here just to make sure I'm covering the things I wanted to. So yeah, definitely parts of this, those courses were definitely kind of great aspects. I think all the courses I took were just phenomenal in terms of being able to give a lot of aspects in terms of just being able to manage a disaster system or disaster kind of element that was going on. And so you kind of bring bits and pieces of those courses in together and are able to utilize those in lots of aspects. So one of the things that Jen and I talked about is I kind of wanted to cover on, and I've been in this kind of field for about 23 years now. I've really, that's just in the Coast Guard, and I had kind of a public health career before that in the state of Tennessee. So I've been doing this a while, and so this is things that kind of were the stepping stones for me. We've all kind of gone through this, and we're probably self-reflecting quite a bit. And I just kind of want to give you some of the things that I think are important to us as we develop and get into whatever track we decide to kind of run in or go through and be able to discuss. And so elements that I want to consider or just always look for opportunities to grow and always look for opportunities to kind of advance yourself. And that's not as easy as a lot of people would kind of have you think. Going to school is definitely, that aspect, but you've got to find things even after you graduate that are going to continually enhance. And one of the things that I've done is again, get those professional credentials that really have helped me. Whenever you get a professional credential, you're going to have to maintain it. And so that maintenance in itself is something that you're going to have to there you go. Yeah, like your CEM with the I see that. So you've got to really plug that in terms of being able to make sure that you're kept up to speed and you are, again, very knowledgeable of your craft. If you continue that education aspect of it, which is part of that maintenance of those credentials, I think you're really going far in terms of being relevant. So that's our current commandant. One of his aspects is remaining relevant, ready and relevant. And so that's I totally agree with that. I think that's a very big aspect with what we need to do. So look for networking opportunities is the way to go. So,
sorry, before you, we had a question. Your professional credentials. Yes, I did make the joke about your CEM, which is a good one. But
yep.
Another question was like, how can you get them? So, are there places that you would recommend looking, or?
Absolutely. You're.
Are you? I think we just lost the audio a little bit. What did you just say?
So yeah, I am definitely going to be there in just about 5 minutes. So let me get there, and I will definitely talk about where to go and some of the credentials I think may be important to us. So I won't skip over that for sure. So one of the first things that I did going into, I was the chief of environmental response in billet that I was in Elizabeth City, North Carolina. I was also asked to be the local emergency planning commission chair. And so I was able to sit on that board. I had to get some approvals. But if you look into the LEPC, and it's the local emergency planning committee, they are required across the United States. So every county, every community is supposed to have an LEPC board. That LEPC is part of a CERCLA requirement. And so again, each community is supposed to have that. Not every board is a come one, come all kind of prospect, but you can inquire with them and what does it take in order to be an LEPC board member. And so in Tennessee, I was on the LEPC board. I was not the chairperson, and I just showed up as a representative from the health department that I worked in. And so what are LEPCs and what do they do for us? They are the emergency planning aspect to each county. And so they kind of go through and they do the evaluations of what they would expect to be a major problem in that particular area. So if I'm on the coast, I'm looking at coastal floods or hurricanes. If I'm in the Midwest, I'm looking at tornadoes, snowstorms, perhaps earthquakes, that sort of thing. So I'm looking at those elements and I'm drawing in the police, the fire element, the hospitals, the local community in terms of industry, maybe rail and transportation. All of those folks are meeting in one place and we're all talking the same language and we're all talking the same kind of aspects of emergency response and what that means. And so, for instance, the hospitals, they have to know what the surges are going to look like and what we can expect and where that communication lines are coming from. These are great places to witness drills or even be a part of drills. And so you can go in and they can all of a sudden give you notice that there's going to be a drill at an area, and you can pull whoever you're working with, potentially pull them into that drill scenario. And again, it will count for training and that sort of thing as well. So I would really try to hit those places up. So I say there was a one, come all kind of aspect in Tennessee. In North Carolina, you had to get approved to be on the board by the state's CERC. So that's the State Emergency Response Commission. You just had to basically prove that you were someone that was legitimate. And so if you're working with a company that has the potential for emergency response, then you would be a legitimate member of that board. And so they just have to basically approve you. So again, some states work that way. Not all of them do. A lot of them are just, you just show up and you have to find out when those meetings are. If you look in the phone book or look, that's how old I am, phone books. If you look in the directories and just type in LEPCs, whatever local community you're on, it's going to pop up because they're very good about communicating. And so you're going to see that. You're going to see when those meetings are and where they meet. And so you can attend those, introduce yourself. It's an unbelievable networking opportunity. And so again, I recommend that highly. And so you're going to see, again, fire, health, police, state, local, federal, all positions are there. So those are big parts of that. Next thing that I am really, really fond of, and I just think it's an element that everybody should just consider. You're getting to the level where you're becoming an expert. You're becoming an expert in your field. Don't ever forget to be a teacher. Okay, be a teacher, because that's going to make the best improvement in your life you've ever thought. And so I can tell you that. I can tell you that from personal experience. But if you are a teacher of industrial hygiene, environmental health, public health, going into our response world, ICS, whatever it is, when you are that instructor, now you are forcing yourself to become the resident expert on whatever field that is. So just really dive deep into that and become a teacher. So I'm a teacher with the Coast Guard. I teach at the training center. I'm also a teacher at Embry-Riddle University. I teach with the health and safety program. I do that online. I do teaching with health and safety as well up at the University of Alaska. And so those are all aspects of that. I'm never going to stop being a teacher. And again, I feel like it's so important to be able to do that when you're at this level, that that should always be in the back of your head to go through and be that instructor and be that teacher. There are people that are just as thirsty as you were back behind you that are coming up through different programs. You're going to want to grab them and pull them up to your level and see what they do when they fly. And so these are just amazing opportunities for you to do that. And so I just really encourage you to be a teacher. And if I don't say it again, I'm going to say it one more time. Be a teacher. That is such a rewarding experience, and it is such a wonderful way to get into the field that you're looking at. So you look for schools. You don't have to be the college, level or whatever. I've taken it at all levels, and so those are big parts of that. So I noticed here somebody already put that in, that FEMA has training available. They certainly do. Do not pass that up. If you're looking for resume fodder, I'm not trying to say that's what you want to fill your resume with, because you could easily do it, but you certainly want to put aspects that you've taken ICS 100, 200, that you've got that basic for ICS, and there's other kind of specialties within that FEMA world that are going to really help you out. So I give this to students as well as I teach in other aspects, even in the Coast Guard. And I say, go to that website and just load up on it, because if you're looking for something and you look at monster.com and there's a job on there that says you need ICS, you want to be able to check that block, and it is really too easy not to just go on there and do that and get that through. So keep that in mind. So those are big parts of that. So again, ICS 100, 200, 300, you're going to be able to speak that language, the ICS language, and that sort of thing. DOT also has Hazmat Schools. If you go into the DOT, especially the PEMSA, and forgive me for not knowing the acronym right now, it's PHMSA, Pipeline Hazardous Materials something. So look at that one. You can actually get certified as a hazardous materials manager, not a CHMM, but you can get certified as a hazmat manager there. There are a lot of classes, and it's an actual DOT certificate that is awarded. So again, these are kind of things that you may want to consider as resume fodder for yourself. So let's look into other credentials that are out there for you, and things that are going to force you to get into a realm of continual education and that sort of thing. So we talk about the credentials I have. I am very specific with the environmental health. So I'm a registered environmental health specialist. That means I can go out and do a variety of environmental health things, anywhere from looking at swimming pools, food establishments, to going into emergency response and environmental health issues that are out there. I'm also a certified hazardous materials manager, which is a credential that means that I have to go in and I'm able to, again, look at hazardous materials from shipping to gathering to being able to run a treatment storage disposal facility, which I did when I was in Elizabeth City, North Carolina. So that certification, again, just builds on that. So in order to maintain that certification, I have to continually put in the CEUs, or continuing education units, or credits that allow me to maintain that. So that forces me basically to go out and either teach or I go out and go to classes, or I go to seminars, or I go to conferences in order to make sure that I've got those credentials, the need to have the requisite education in order to maintain those credentials. The ones that I would recommend here out of this program, and I am currently working towards, is the International Association of Emergency Management's credential of the Certified Emergency Manager. So that Certified Emergency Manager is really getting looked at. It's a relatively new credential. When I say relatively new, it's probably, I think it's less than 15 years old, where some of these other credentials have been around for 50 years or more. And so you look at that, and it's really coming up in terms of its respect. What it is it certifies you in that emergency management element that looks at how you are a responder, how you organize emergency management. ICS is a big part of that, and other aspects to that. So it's something that you can really build yourself up. It's being looked at, as I talk, in circles of both local, state, and federal officials. I'm seeing that credential more and more, and it's becoming more and more respected in terms of, you've got that, you've really gone through something. What's it take to get that credential? You've got to work in the field for at least 5 years is what I recall. You've got to be able to talk about your experiences and kind of list them in terms of all of the different things that you've done. Some of that can be school work, others can be actual responses or going to LEPC drills, that sort of thing. And then the last part is that you've got, well, there's two more parts. You've got to write an essay, and it's an essay on how you would manage a particular emergency response. And then the last one is you do have to pass an examination, and it's an examination that they kind of outline the different study guides and things that you will need. And that's pretty much any credential follows that same suit. And so I had to do the same thing for my REHS. I had to do the same thing for my CHMM and that sort of thing. So yeah, I see that. So the IAM also offers that associate and emergency management, and that's kind of a stepping stone to that CEM. So I do agree with that, and that's definitely a way to go through and look to kind of gradually work up to that CEM credential. So see here, Jen, did that kind of cover what you were talking about with the CEM?
Yes, sorry, it took me a second to,
that's all right.
The mute button wasn't coming up. So one of the things that we were talking about doing with the student chapter is, like, I know personally, and I may have mentioned this to a number of you before. So one of the people that I drill with, well, he's active duty, he's my active duty supervisor. He is an IAEM mentor. So he looked at everything that I had done and was pointing out stuff that I didn't even think was relevant. And he's like, no, this is really important. Put this in here and put this in here. And he was showing me how best to put together my application. So one of the things that we were hoping to do with the student chapter is, as we had students and faculty and alumni who get their CEM or have their CEM, we can kind of just keep paying it forward to students who want to get theirs. So that was a big thought that we had. And it is I don't want to say, it's not a difficult process. It's like it's a little bit complicated. I think they make it that way, so that way when you get out on the other end, you know, it's not like everybody can get this, but people who are working in the field, who are studying in the field, I'd be willing to bet that you have pretty much everything that you need. You just have to jump through the appropriate hoops to get it. And I know the quality of students that we have here and what they're involved in. So yeah, that's definitely something that I'd encourage you to do. I don't have mine yet. It's something that I'm working for, and I know, not to make this Coast Guard centric, but I know that the Coast Guard is also trying to develop a program right now at the academy where students will cadets will leave the academy with their 4-year college diploma and a CEM certification. So it's definitely gaining a lot of traction, and it's something that we're trying to make possible if you're interested in pursuing.
Excellent. Yeah. So yeah, I think what you're hitting on is so why are you here? Why are you at Penn State? And the same thing applies to why would you get the credential? You're trying to distinguish yourself. You're trying to make sure that people know you're a consummate professional, that you are continually developing your skill set, and that you're relevant again in the work field. So make that kind of a passion, a drive for you to again go out and distinguish yourself, because it's hard for companies to kind of figure out who to hire or what they want on their board. And when you can point to that and point to a degree from Penn State and point to the credentials that you have, it just makes it that much easier. I've had to hire people that are go through these hiring boards, and when I see that, I know they come with a certain level. They come with a skill set already kind of ingrained. It doesn't mean it's the end all to be all, but I'm just saying that I know they've gone through a certain aspect and they can speak the language that I'm trying to get across. So that's kind of a big deal in my book when I'm on hiring boards and stuff. When I see those credentials and people have made that effort to go that much further. Just as an FYI, the IAEM conference this year is in October. It's going to be in Grand Rapids, Michigan at this point. So we'll have to see if they have that with the COVID and everything that's out there. But that's where they have it. Those conferences are really great. If you get with a bunch of folks, so when my professional organizations meet at the AHIA Conference, the American Industrial Hygiene Association Conference, as well as the REHS, the NEHA, National Environmental Health Association, all of my former school associates, as well as a lot of my professional associates, we do kind of meet. We have different meeting groups, and we break out, and then a lot of times we'll go out to dinner and that sort of thing too. But it's again a good way to network and just kind of catch up with folks and be able to kind of understand what's been going on and where those folks have been. So again, real good opportunities there. So again, I just we'll go back and just hit on that in terms of distinguishing yourself later on in your after you go through your degree here. So good stuff. So try to see if I've got everything. So I'm looking at real close to the top of the hour. I think that's when we kind of decided I was going to really leave this open to a lot more questions and that sort of thing. And so I really want to dial into anything that you may have in terms of questions or again, things that you want to talk about. So I'll just be quiet and let you take the mic here if you've got questions.
I will say, when everyone is thinking, the conferences, not just the IAEM or anything specific, especially when you get into capstones and independent studies, are also a great way to show off your work. And it doesn't have to be something huge. I mean, there are a lot of smaller scale, more local conferences that are great ways to put your work together and do a poster or submit an abstract. And that's also a really great way to, it's not a certification, but it also does help. And it also helps with the networking aspect of it.
Yeah,
so does anybody have any questions? You can raise your hand or you can type it in the chat and I can read them.
I see somebody here said ICS classes do a train the trainer. Absolutely. And I used to be a trainer for 100, 200, and 300. And again, just being that teacher just got me a lot more experience with being an ICS kind of person. I really was able to integrate that into a lot of the responses that I worked and went through. ICS is kind of a hit and miss with a lot of people. There's not some folks are just not really wanting to do ICS, and you can feel it, and you got to kind of bring them over to that side. And so I've used ICS. I was in New York during 9/11, and so I was actually witnessed the Twin Towers being hit and going down. We utilized ICS for months and months. after that attack. And so just knowing that we had a system in place, it was managed, we did things in a coordinated kind of way, just gave a little bit more order to the whole thing that was going on. So that was a big kind of selling point for me, and that's when I was really sold on ICS and how it works. And I've used it in several large responses throughout the Coast Guard, and we've used it and hit on it well. So when people say they're not going to use ICS, I try to find the safety officer and I try to find the finance officer. When I can find those people, I can say, do you wish this was managed a little better? And inevitably they say, yes, I do. And I kind of say, let's go to the incident commander and tell them what we're going to offer them in terms of management and that sort of thing. So kind of helps them out a little bit to be able to get into that ICS role when people may have been a little reluctant at first, when we can show them that the money is a big deal and that the safety is a big deal. And if we roll it into an ICS response, it's really going to help them manage those aspects. So,
Melbourne, that's a really good point. In the vaccination clinics that I'm helping right now, especially the ones at the stadiums and convention centres, we've actually pivoted in the last 2 weeks to doing more incident command style setups and operations. And we went out onto Amazon and brought everyone coloured vests to set it up like an ICS approach. Gave them all its titles, so they all feel very empowered. And it's working much better than what it did in the first couple of weeks.
Yeah, I and sometimes I laugh at vests. The reason I laugh at vests is because it's part of it. And if I know, the guy wearing the green jacket or the green vest is the money guy, it just makes it that much easier. And I know people kind of go, oh gosh, I got to put this vest on again. And you're like, no, it really does make it work. And it just it's the whole thing, the buy-in and all that. So it's a big part of it, certainly. Good points. Excellent.
So I know we got ICS through the Coast Guard. Gavin, did you pick it up in the military, or did you get ICS training through your public health work?
Yeah, Jen. So again, ICS is really an American thing. We don't do it in the rest of the world, and we have other names for other sort of command structures. And again, ICS has been taken to other countries. But again, when I came, I had always worked in emergency management in Australia, England, and for different governments. But when I started at CDC and then went to US Department of State, that's where I learned my ICS from. Going out to, again, like Melbourne, I had 9 weeks in Banda Aceh in 2004
Nice.
with CDC. And again, we were under an ICS structure there, which was a little challenging because we had so many World Health Organizations and other voluntary organizations. But then, since then, all the disaster work I've done has been under an ICS, or more, I would say more of a unified command approach, but again, with those ICS principles of having the pillars.
Yep. And you're so spot on with that. It says if you have the ability to walk into an organization and give them the ICS kind of fundamentals, they're so appreciative of it, because we're all kind of under that fear of what are we going to do and how are we going to manage this. And if you bring structure to that and you bring the ability to kind of manage in the event of an emergency, it really gives the managers and the owners, whomever, just a big sigh of relief that you've got that skill set and they want you to share it with the rest of their crew for sure. Yeah.
So just one more point on that, Jen. The nursing homes that are using ICS, and it's really the curriculum that's come out of California. So you just download the manual from the California, and you just put nursing home ICS. What we're seeing in Ohio, Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, nursing homes that have used nursing home ICS have had less cases of COVID-19. And then we've still got a number of nursing homes right now that have had 0 cases of COVID-19, and they're all using nursing home ICS. So one of the big demands we're seeing now, this is really, again, through the Penn State ECHO program that I work on, is that a lot of these nursing homes are asking for better structure. Or we've got a limited number of people, but how can we operationally use limited resources more effectively?
Great. The Coast Guard used to use the California Specialized Training Institute to do their ICS training, and so still really good friends with a lot of those folks. And so they're there still. The Coast Guard's kind of moved away from that and gone to an online structure, but they still offer those courses up, and they're still in there. And they get in some real specialized kind of training. But you're absolutely right. That's where the genesis of ICS was, through the fire response industry, and so that was something that came through and really meshed well with the military, especially the Coast Guard.
So if you are interested in looking at so the basic ICS classes that we're talking about are available on FEMA's website as part of their independent study. It's a couple hours, they're free, you get a certificate at the end of it. The basic ones are ICS 100, 200, 700, and 800, and then some like the Coast Guard is now requiring for us 300 and 400. So if you are interested in getting more of an ICS foundation, 100, 200, 300, 400, 700, and 800 are the ones that you at least want to have under your belt first.
And then keep that open. Like, again, with the LEPCs, they may come in and offer other very specialized ICS safety training. And so there's an ICS 404, which is the safety officer. And so that's a really good one. It's a week-long ICS course. And so if you can get into that one, that would be great. And they may require some money to be able to do that one, but it's a really nice one to have under your belt. So I think there's a couple of messages or questions there, Jen.
I don't think questions. Graciela was saying, thank you, great insight and advice, so thank you. And she wrote down the ICS questions. And then the other ones were just things that I posted. So does anybody else have any other questions that they either want to ask over the mic or put in the chat?
I didn't mean to turn this into an ICS commercial, but yeah, that's good. We got down this road. So,
no, I mean, we talk about it in some of our, at least like the intro classes too, because it is something that is going to come up.
Awesome.
Any questions?
So I'd like to offer this up too. So if you get questions afterwards you just didn't think of, and you'd be like, oh, wow, that would have been a nice question to ask. Jen's got my contact information, and if you want to reach out to me, don't hesitate. Got questions about the Public Health Service, if you've got questions about the Coast Guard and what we do, I'll be glad to sit down and talk with you. That's something that I get very passionate about, and it enriches my day. So I would be glad to do that. So.
Well, on that note, I just want to say thank you again very much for speaking with us. This was a lot of really great information, so I do appreciate your time.
Anytime. Thank you.
Yeah, that was great. Thanks, Melbourne. Good job.
Hey, Gavin, thank you.
So Jean says the seminar has been great, really gave us great insight and advice. Thank you, one of our Penn State alum. So yeah. Thank you. We really do appreciate it. And I just want to remind everyone again, tomorrow, if you're interested, 4 p.m. is the COVID vaccine talk. It's on